Thank you for tuning in to V News. You're watching the Bulletins. Coming up next, we have your top stories. State President Trương Tấn Sang's activities in New York. Foreign Minister Phạm Bình Minh meets Estonian and Romanian counterparts. Export earnings from agroforestry aquatic products drop slightly. On the sidelines of the United Nations Summit in New York, State President Trương Tấn Sang had various activities. Our reporters will bring you more details. At a high-level event on new rural development and sustainable community models, President Sang called on developing countries to outline rural development strategies that take their limited resources and budget into account. He stated that with nearly 70% of its population living in rural areas, Vietnam has been implementing a national program on new rural development with 19 criteria boosting infrastructure and income. Sharing Vietnam's relevant experience, the leader emphasized strong political commitment, community involvement, personnel training, diversification and utilization of resources in an open and transparent manner, and in the motto, known by the people, done by the people, inspected by the people, and benefited by the people. According to President Sang, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recently adopted by the UN Summit reflects the aspiration of a world free from hunger and poverty. While in New York, President Sang also met Turkmenistan President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, during which the two leaders agreed to provide effective support for each other for the sake of global peace and security. The Vietnamese leader suggested facilitating visits by businesses and trade and investment promotion in highlight fields, including garment, leather and footwear, oil and gas, construction and materials. In another meeting with Mozambican President Filipe Jacinto Nyusi, President Sang affirmed that the Vietnamese party and state always treasure their traditional friendship with the Mozambique Liberation Front's party and Mozambican state. He asked for increasing all-level visits, especially by ministries, local authorities and businesses, to explore collaboration possibilities through specific and practical means, as well as pledge all possible support to joint ventures, including the telecoms provider Movitel, and a project on planting food trees in Mozambique from 2013 to 2017. Speaking highly of Vietnam's underway projects in Mozambique, President Nyusi said joint ventures, which are to continue receiving government incentives, will help expand bilateral ties in other potential fields, including oil and gas, maritime affairs, and the construction of seaports. Meeting Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven, the Vietnamese leader said the two countries should continue all-around engagements via all-level visits and exchanges. To facilitate trade between Vietnam and Sweden and Europe in general, he asked Sweden to promptly sign the Vietnam-EU Free Trade Agreement and push for the European Commission to recognize Vietnam as a market economy. He stressed that Vietnam is willing to be a bridge for the EU and Sweden to boost their relationships with ASEAN, adding that Vietnam is seeking more official development assistance via the United Nations or the World Bank in response to climate change and gender equality. Turning to regional and global issues of shared concerns, he requested Sweden support ASEAN and Vietnam's position on the settlement of disputes by peaceful means, in line with international law and the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Also on September 26, President Trương Tấn Sang met representatives of the Vietnamese community, students and staff of the Vietnamese delegation to the United Nations, as well as American friends. Regarding current affairs, the state leader said one of the most serious challenges to peace, stability and development in Southeast Asia and the Asia-Pacific region is territorial disputes in the East Sea. Especially China's move to reclaim islands and rocks on the Trường Sa archipelago violated international laws and the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the East Sea, causing concerns to most of the regional nations. He affirmed that the party, state and people are consistently resolved to protect Vietnam's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as its stance to settle the disputes on the basis of international laws, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea in 1982. The state leader stressed that the Vietnamese community in the U.S. is an indispensable part of the Vietnamese fatherland and a solid bridge for the Vietnam-U.S. friendship. Within the framework of the Vietnamese delegation's activities in New York, Foreign Minister Phạm Bình Minh met his Estonian counterpart, Marina Kaijuran. Both ministers spoke highly of the signing of bilateral agreements to create a legal framework for promoting the multifaceted cooperation between the two nations. Minister Kaijuran confirmed Estonia's support for Vietnam in implementing the Vietnam-EU Framework Agreement on Comprehensive Partnership and Cooperation signed in 2012 and the Vietnam-EU Free Trade Agreement whose negotiations concluded last month. She also agreed with Vietnam and ASEAN's position on the peaceful settlement of disputes in the East Sea, in line with international law, especially the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the East Sea towards formulating a code of conduct in the East Sea. On this occasion, the two ministers signed an agreement on double taxation avoidance and prevention of income tax evasion. Meeting Romanian Foreign Minister Bogdan Lucian Auresu, Minh pushed for the facilitation of high-level visits to strengthen mutual understanding, particularly in trade and investment. He also requested Romania soon recognize Vietnam as a market economy and urged EU member states to approve the Vietnam-EU Free Trade Agreement. Auresu vowed to do his best to make Romania one of the first EU countries to approve this agreement. The two ministries are set to convene a meeting of the Intergovernmental Committee in 2016 to devise specific initiatives for increased collaboration across oil and gas, information technology, and shipbuilding. They debated regional and global issues of shared concern, including the peaceful settlement of disputes at sea, and promised to work closely at international and multilateral forums. In a recent article, the Financial Times of the UK evaluated Vietnam as a bright spot among emerging markets, together with Hungary, Romania, Poland and the Czech Republic, with its high and stable growth rate.
The article said Vietnam's economic growth in 2014 was well above its average rate in the 5 years prior. From 2008 to 2014, Vietnam's economy had increased by nearly 40% of its GDP. The article cited market forecasts of Consensus Economics as saying that Vietnam's economy could reach a growth rate of 6.1% in 2015 and 6.2% in 2016. The Vietnamese government has previously set a growth target of 6.2% for this year, but Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng acknowledged in June that the figure could increase to 6.4%. In its latest Asian Development Outlook Update report, the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, forecasted Vietnam's economic growth will expand by 6.5% in 2015 and 6.6% in 2016. Meanwhile, Chief Executive of Dragon Capital, Dominic Scriven, told the Financial Times that the country's economic growth could reach 6.5% in 2015 and around 7% in 2016. According to the General Department of Customs, the foreign direct investment sector earned over $72.35 billion from exports in the first 8 months of this year, accounting for 67.9% of total export turnover. However, the article pointed out risks the market is facing, such as its loose monetary policy, inflation, and the nation's banking system bad debt ratio reaching up to 15% of GDP.
Exports earnings from agroforestry aquatic products in September were estimated at $2.15 billion. The figure brought the total number in the first 9 months of 2015 to $21.65 billion, down 5% over the same period last year. According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, farm produce raked in $10.29 billion in the first 3 quarters, a year-on-year drop of 7.2%. Export value of coffee saw the biggest fall of 32.2%, while those of rubber decreased 13.7% and rice down 15.7%. In the reviewed period, export turnover of aquatic products fell by 17.8% from the same period of 2014. Since the beginning of the year, rice prices have remained low on both the domestic and foreign markets, while prices of rubber materials and finished products on the home market dropped due to reductions in world prices. Prices of aquatic products such as starfish and shrimp remained lower than expectations. However, prices of pepper and cashew nuts have increased thanks to growing demands on the world market. In the first 9 months of 2015, the southern province of Bình Dương attracted nearly $1.5 billion in foreign direct investment, surpassing the yearly target by 47.7%.
During the period, the province licensed 141 new FDI projects worth $817 million. It also saw $660 million added to 89 existing projects. The fruitful result is attributed to the locality's continued administrative procedure reform, enhanced investment promotion, and well-prepared industrial park infrastructure. The province is currently home to 2,525 valid FDI projects from 39 countries and territories with a total investment capital of $21.9 billion. Japan remains its largest investor with $4.87 billion, accounting for 22.7% of the total investment capital. Trade was another bright spot in the province's economic performance. In the reviewed period, Bình Dương recorded a trade surplus of $2.5 billion. Its export turnover jumped 17.6% from the same period last year to hit $14 billion, with key exports seeing stellar growth, including garments, footwear, wooden furniture, telephones and spare parts, and electronic products. Meanwhile, the province's imports were estimated at nearly $11.5 billion, an annual increase of 17.5%. Of the total, the foreign investment sector accounted for 78.9%, importing mainly machines and equipment, fabric and footwear materials.
Though far away from home, Vietnamese children in Singapore and Malaysia do not feel left out of the joyful atmosphere of the Mid-Autumn Festival, as they participated in various celebrative activities by themselves. Our correspondents report from the two countries. Dozens of Vietnamese families took their children to the Vietnamese embassy in Singapore in the evening of September 26 to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival 2015. It was an excellent opportunity for young Vietnamese to get an insight into the traditional value through folk games and activities like lion dance and lantern parade.
So we was invited here for the Lantern Festival. It's very nice because we can meet different Vietnamese from different Vietnamese community from Singapore, and the kids can enjoy the different activity like painting, drawing, singing, and so on. There is a lot of different kids in this event. That's very nice.
The event also included other events such as a talent show and a painting competition, which aimed to promote the traditional value, language and culture of Vietnam to younger generations. The same day, with the support of the Embassy of Vietnam, the Vietnamese Women Association in Malaysia hosted a similar event for Vietnamese children in the country. Addressing the event, Vietnamese ambassador to Malaysia Phạm Cao Phong hailed the efforts made by the Vietnamese Women Association in particular and the Vietnamese community in general for organizing this first ever impressive cultural event for the children. He expressed his hope that younger Vietnamese generation in Malaysia will continue to study and maintain the Vietnamese language, thus contributing to the national construction and development cause. In the warm and festive atmosphere of the event, the children participated in multiple traditional games and enjoyed homemade mooncakes. And that has wrapped up our bulletin. Thank you for your attention. For more information, you can log on to our website at www.vietnamplus.vn. We'll see you soon.